Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. So let's see, Dave, you and I were just talking about your spectrum of S. corona borealis and instrument response correction. Let me see if I can pull that up. So it's actually not required that spectra submitted to AVSpec are instrument response corrected. Therefore, I'm not super strict about that in submissions. I do, when I see a very clear error, I make sure to point it out to the observer to let them know that that's going on so that they can fix it. But let me see. I'll share my screen here. All right. And for those of you who aren't aware, the SAR S. corona borealis is a MIRA variable. It's currently near maximum, and it has gone quite a lot brighter than it ever has in the history of the AAVSO monitoring its maxima, which goes back to like the 1840s or 1860s, something like that. It's, I think, over a magnitude brighter than it's ever gotten before. So that's very interesting to see. And I've been trying to encourage increased monitoring of its spectra, such as here are, oh wait, no, that one's, here are two spectra that Dave Decker has submitted of it so far. And so I see what you mean about the difference in the size of the gamma and delta lines there. I don't know whether that's a real variability in the SAR or not. So I would say Robin is, he's good at processing his spectra. You can assume that those are accurate, but.
So I don't trust the relative flux on the gamma and the delta lines at the left end. If I look at what Robin posted on the BAA site and STIB, whoever that is, posted one from the same date that I took my spectra. And actually, if you go back to the recent, yeah, just below here? On that STIB, show that one.
Okay.
And what you see here is that the relative flux between the gamma and delta lines is different than mine, quite a bit different. So I'm thinking it has to do with my instrument response. I'm using the ALPI 600, and it's new to me, so I'm still working on building those files right. I'll probably rework that again after I read through Christian Buell's stuff on how to do instrument response. And then resubmit it again. So you might see that come off. I might delete it. You might see a new one.
Okay. Great. Yeah. If you can find a way to improve the accuracy, of course, that'll be a great update.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I'm still working on how to do that instrument response. It's just somehow it doesn't look right.
Yeah, it's tricky. That was the hardest part of processing my own spectra back when I was doing that frequently.
Yeah.
So ST, yes?
Naively, if it were a question of instrument response, that should affect the continuum and the lines in the same way.
Yeah.
But the continuum looks the same in both spectra, more or less, as far as I can tell at this scale.
Correct. Yeah. And actually, here, I'm going to load the profiles together so that I can scale them next to each other and we can get a closer look at this. But you have a very good point, Nancy. So I happen to know STIB, that's my friend Tim Stone, and he's been shooting me these spectra over text when he's out shooting them. I know that his spectrograph, low spec spectrograph, he's struggling a lot with chromatic aberration on the blue end, softening the lines pretty sharply as it gets out towards the UV. So it's also possible that maybe the equivalent widths are more comparable, but the heights of the peaks are not as you would expect because perhaps the lines are broadened differently from that chromatic aberration. That's just a guess. I don't know for sure, but I know that he's been sending me a lot of examples of the chromatic aberration.
Lauren Scott here. Can I comment on that?
Yes, please do.
Another possibility that would be perhaps account for at least some of the difference between those two spectra, it would be the slit rotation. If the two slits were rotated differently, like one is more perpendicular to the horizon and the other is more parallel to the horizon, that could result in more or less, light on the blue and correspondingly red end in getting in on the spectra.
True. And that's another thing which we would expect to see showing up in the continuum, I would say.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me get back
What's
to
the difference in time between these two spectrum?
let me see.
I think it's like on the same date. I don't know how many hours are different, but
6, 8. Yeah, not many. It looks like maybe 2 hours difference.
coupled with the spectrum that Robin posted on the BAA site, which looks just about like Tim Stone's spectrum. It's not as enhanced as far as the vertical scale goes, but the relative flux looks the same between Tim's and the BAA spectrum. So.
Oh, and there goes the reference profile. Hang on 1 second. Open reference series. All right, so here the darker blue or purple one is Tim's spectrum, and the blue one, the light blue one is yours, Dave.
Okay.
So I do see some differences on the blue and red ends. I wouldn't call it severe. I don't know, Nancy, what do you think? You have a lot of experience with spectra.
I have a lot of experience with spectra, but without knowing the details of the instruments, it's really difficult to make a comment.
Mhm.
Actually, in this spectrum, I can also see H alpha and H beta.
Mhm.
And it's curious that that H delta and H gamma are much stronger than either one, apparently.
Mhm.
I
think that may be expected in Myra variables like this.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that they often feature a Balmer increment instead of a Balmer decrement.
Decrement.
Yeah. Zoom in on this.
But
area.
that's extreme anyway. But you're right. I've seen that too now that you mention it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely noticeable, this difference in the amplitudes of the two lines. I don't have an explanation for why that is.
There's also a clear difference in line width.
Yeah,
as you mentioned.
Tim's spectrum is about R2000. And Dave, you said you're shooting with an Alpi, right?
Yes, right.
So that would be more like R600. So I'd say that's just a difference in resolution of the spectrographs. One interesting feature to look for if any of you go out and shoot S Corona Borealis, which I encourage you to do, not visible in either of these spectra because it's also a little bit farther into the infrared, but the calcium triplet is partially filled in by emission at the moment, and that may vary as Corona Borealis continues through its cycle. That emission, I just learned myself yesterday in a fascinating post from Uwe Zermhul on the AVSpec forum. That emission is stimulated by hydrogen Balmer emission here, where it overlaps the calcium doublet. Apparently, that hydrogen Balmer emission can help ionize the calcium atoms and stimulate them to glow. So
yeah, H epsilon would be right in here.
Correct. Yeah, but it is quite absent in in these spectra. So very interesting effect there. So yes, I would definitely encourage any of you here strongly to go out and shoot S Corps Bor. Particularly right now we have quite good monitoring coming in from Dave and Tim. So thank you very much for that. I'm hoping that even as it starts to fade beyond the reach of slit spectrographs, we may be able to get some people who have star analyzers to continue following it into the minimum. Now, I should probably say that I'm not an expert on Myra variables. I don't know why it's doing what it's doing, but I can tell just by looking at the historical light curve, which I'll bring up here, that whatever it's doing is out of the ordinary. So what we want is to have a data set already recorded of this event, so that whenever an expert in Myra variables does come along, the AVSO can, provide that record, because once it's gone, it's gone.
Okay, so the white dots are the current present light curve and the other colors are previous maxima, correct?
Yes, it's the entire historical visual and V-band
cool.
light curve.
Cool.
And the color map here, I couldn't figure out the settings to label the color bar, so I just left it off. This was for a quick post on a forum. But the color map here, the more yellow points are more recent, and darker blue points are older.
Which makes sense in view of the white ones being the current maximum.
Yes, yeah.
And what's this white dot here?
Which one?
Oh, I'm sorry. You can't see my cursor, obviously. At phase 1.16 or 7 approximately.
And approximately in the middle of the scatter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not white. It's just a lot of yellow stacked on top of each other, because it appears that we had one observer making very, very frequent observations for a few days there. So that was just a lot of points.
Interesting.
That landed on top of each other. All right, well, that's the news about S. Corona Borealis. Now, I want to go ahead and ask if anyone else came here to this meeting today with particular questions in mind.
So Lauren, I've got one, not that I came to this meeting with, but one that came up by something you said. You said that the AVSpec doesn't require that submitted spectra be instrument response corrected. So I'm trying to understand what the impact would be for spectra that do not have that correction applied for someone subsequently mining the data and using it for research.
That's something I don't really have an answer to. Our general stance is that it's fine for the data to not be instrument response corrected as long as that is documented, as long as that is known to the end user that it's not instrument response corrected. Right now, we don't have a good way of informing the end user about that. However, that's included within some of the AVSpec improvements, which will hopefully be coming out soon, is a better system for tracking that sort of important metadata.
I can comment on that.
Please do.
Having generated many spectra that are not instrument response corrected, except for being flat fielded. Flat fielding takes care of the instrument response to first order, except for the fact that the color of the lamp, the flat lamp is, if you use a lamp, the color of the lamp is generally different from the color of the star. So there's still a differential response there. But the end user is very often going to either want to flux calibrate the spectrum or else continuum normalize the spectrum. And in either case, the instrument response will wash out. So it really doesn't matter whether you correct for it or not.
That's very good to know. Thank you.
So am I putting in a lot more effort than I need to by, selecting a Miles reference star and using that to develop an instrument? It's an instrument and atmospheric response correction. So am I wasting my time in doing that, or should I still do it?
I would never say it was a waste of time to collect spectra of standard stars. The more standard stars, the better, given that you still get some of your own science done. But there's one exception to what I just said about not correcting for instrument response, though, which is that if the instrument response is really extreme in some sense, then it might be hard for the end user to make sense out of it. if you don't correct for it. And I've seen some cases of my own spectra having that problem too, and don't really know what to do about it.
I have a quick question on that. Does the comments you just made, Nancy, regarding instrument response apply to both slit and slitless spectrograph?
I don't know much about slitless spectroscopy, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
My main experience, I should probably say, is with fiber-fed A shell, which is probably not something that most of you work with. I have done some slit spectroscopy, however.
Okay, thanks.
So to the best of my knowledge, there's no standard procedure out there for doing instrument response correction with slitless spectra. At least with the tools available to amateurs, it's too difficult and it's not done. There's issues with thin film interference that's usually removed by flats with a slit spectrograph. You see it as ripples in the flat image. That affects slitless spectra as well, but with slitless spectra, the placement on the sensor and hence the angle of the incoming light can vary. And that causes the wavelength of the ripples to vary, which is very, very hard to correct. I've never actually heard of anyone doing it.
Which smears them out, I guess. Smears the ripples out.
Yeah. Did I start by saying that instrument response correction or flatting? Which one of those was? What I'm meaning to say is flatting. Not you can totally do instrument response correction of slitless spectra, but it's not going to be complete to the level of thin film interference. You're still going to have that, which is normally taken care of by the flats and slit spectrographs. So did anyone else have any questions on the topic of instrument response correction? Okay. Any questions on any other spectroscopic or AVSpec related topics that we should address?
I'm Keith. I have
Often take a phone call.
a mechanics problem.
Okay.
So I've been trying to upload Spectrum. I've done it about a year ago, uploaded Spectrum to you guys. I've been uploading Spectrum to ARAS on cataclysmics for about 2 years. And I just keep having problems with the SkyX writing FITS headers for you guys and not having to manually redo them every time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some simplified way to make it a script or some program to run through to simplify modifying all my FITS headers every time? Or is it just get to do it by manual?
I'm not aware of a tool that exists out there for that. The way that I get my headers right is just using Python and AstroPy.
Yeah.
So it's fairly simple to edit the headers with AstroPy, but that is also fairly manual. You have to write the script to do that.
Yeah. It seems the biggest problem I have with the SkyX is it doesn't put an end of observation time.
And does AVSpec give you an error if you try to submit without one of those?
It does. Let's see. It comes back and gives me, I just tried one again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It comes back and says one error, and it gives me, it looks like the JD time for mid imaging, 24.59780.6504 is not a class float. That's the details it gives.
Okay, that's a little strange. Do you mind sharing your screen to show me what's
No worries.
going on? Thank you.
It says disabled participant.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to set that.
No worries.
Okay, it should be on now.
Let's try that again. There we are. All right. Share. Dink. All right. So this was, for example, what I tried to submit, which is
Mhm.
ECDR. We've been following that very carefully in another group. And this is the error message that I received back after opening the file. So it says, it just basically gives me that that is not a class. That is, I don't understand the error.
Yeah, that's a very strange error to me as well. Could you show me the exact value in the header? I guess it's not telling you which card that is it?
Well, it's I figured out what it was. This is the JD mid,
Uh-huh.
and that's 6504. That's the only way I was able to track it down. But it's
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So it looks to me like it shouldn't be giving you any issues, unless perhaps the value is in quotes inside the header is the only thing I can think of.
Yeah.
If it's not inside quotes, then I don't see any reason why it should be having problems with that. So what I would really appreciate it if you could do is to send me that file. My email address is lharrington@avso.org. I'll put it in the
Okay.
chat.
Yeah.
And I will show that to Bert,
Okay.
who
I'll send
does
you
the
the
coding for
file.
AVSpec.
I'll send the FITS file as well as the analysis to you. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
That's
That
all.
looks like a genuine bug.
I'm sure I can find them if they're there.
Right, thank you.
Lauren, on that same issue, I have just a quick question. For AVSpec submission on the time, are we using the mid time of the stack? Is that usual thing, or what's our preference?
I assume that honestly, I don't have an answer for you about if there is a preference. I think that the JD mid header, which is the one that was just causing the issue for Keith, that card in the header, I believe that the mid time of the stack is what would go into that card. And I think that's a perfectly fine way to specify the time, but honestly, I'm not sure which one is preferred. Yeah, sorry, that's the best answer I can give.
Yeah, I'm still using AVSpec, and when you export your data in AVSpec, the time is a manual submission. In other words, you type in the time based on the FITS file header. So if the FITS file header from a stack shows a mid exposure time, that's what I've been using.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Just to be clear, you're saying that you type in into AVSpec is where you type in this value?
Yes. So
okay.
I have the spectrum. It's done. I'm exporting it for processing, and many of the things are filled in the form on AVSpec, but the time is not. And so the actual time of the exposure, I go to the header file in the FITS file, and I can see the beginning, mid, and end time. So I've been using the mid time to manually enter that time in the AVSpec form. Okay. And then I process it and submit it, and you always accept it. Well, almost always.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like the best practice then, to use the mid time from the header. I don't know. I don't think that we actually have any sort of guideline on file for which time is best, but just from my own personal intuition, I would say mid time is best. So yeah, good choice.
And I forgot to mention, I use Demetra for all my data processing. So in case you've seen these issues with Demetra specifically.
Okay. I have not known any, or I have not helped any other observer who used Demetra before, I don't think, but there shouldn't be a reason why Demetra is producing bad FITS headers. So if the ARIS database is taking it, definitely AVSpec should too. So I'll just forward that on to Bert and see what he can figure out.
Great. And I've sent those to you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, if not, then I actually have a question for all of y'all. I would like to hear about if you have a certain specific observing program where you have certain kinds of targets that you monitor with the goal of science. Could you share a little bit about that? I'm kind of wanting to find out we would like to promote some observing programs, just recommend them to people who are just starting out with AVSpec and don't know what to shoot. So I'd like to hear about what sort of studies there are out there.
I'll start since I'm new.
Okay.
I've been shooting cataclysmics or symbots with the AARS guys. So been studying that. I have a list of about, let's see, how long is it? 170 or so objects.
Wow.
That I try to keep up with. Some of them are far beyond my instrument. I use a C14 with a Lisa, and so I can shoot to about 13th magnitude. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, so my skies, I can see about 7 stars at night. So I'm down to about 13.5, I think is about the faintest. 13.8 is the faintest I can track reasonably. So I've been doing these symbiotes for quite some time, chasing those guys down, and that's what I've been using. They're quite fun.
Interesting. Well, thank you. So this list, how did you put it together? How did you find out which ones were the most valuable to be tracking?
The ARAS site lists the key ones that they want to focus on, and they even give you a cadence and a priority.
Oh, excellent.
So they monitor, and that's about 25% of the objects that are on my list that are out of their database, where they give you a cadence and a priority. And then the rest, we kind of fill in as we see issues, as we see things happening with the group discussions. And that's how I've been tracking that down. They do have specific areas that they're focused on, where they list it from 0 to 4 as far as priority, where 0 is top, and then give you a cadence to monitor. So I mean, like right now, CBR, TCBR is a key one, because they're expecting it to increase in brightness dramatically over the next 6 to 12 months. So they want to keep a cadence on that one on a near daily basis. Is what they're watching for that. That's just an example.
That's good. Very good to know that they have that sort of coordination going on there. I've heard a lot about the science that the Spectro ARIS group is doing, but I guess I wasn't quite sure how much was available publicly in terms of helping people determine targets. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And does anyone else have concentrated observing programs that you want to talk about, or even just resources that you use to find out what sort of targets are of scientific interest at the moment?
So this is Scott. I'll talk a little bit to that. For me, the answer is no. Like Keith, I am fairly new into this. I've also had the further complication of having recently sold my house and just moved into my new house. So the observatory I had for the past 25 plus years is no longer mine. And so it'll be another probably 6 months to a year before I start building the new observatory. So I'm kind of in a bit of a hiatus right now. But that being said, up to this point, I have really just dabbled in little experiments like when we had the Nova Cassiopeia I got on that with my LP and, did a little experiment with the rotation rate of Jupiter. Was also able to determine distance to 3C273, kind of things like that. I do have both the LP600 and also a L high res. So I'm actually at the point where I've got some capability with those two instruments, SANS Observatory right now. And I'm kind of like looking for useful projects to engage in. In addition to NOVA, which are only, occasional, I was thinking about perhaps getting involved in monitoring Myra type variables throughout their cycles spectroscopically. But, I'm kind of like, looking for suggestions.
Okay, well, S Corona Borealis is a Myra. That's a good place to start. Yeah, that's also good to know. I think that we have kind of a lot of people in the spectroscopy observing section who are just like you, Scott, who have gotten themselves to a point where they have quite a nice setup for taking observations. You figured out the data processing and how to explore the sky, really. And then there eventually comes a point where, exploring the sky, it's a lot of fun, but you start wanting to do something more. That's why I am doing this little mini survey here. Now, of course, I'm asking other people offline from this meeting as well. But I would like to kind of try and provide some example projects that are perennially relevant, so that we have a starting place promoted within AVSpec.
I'd be open for that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing where you're at right now with that.
In other words, I just admitted I'm doing absolutely nothing. But hope to change that in the near term. In fact, I'm still going to have an army of workmen in my house tomorrow. I've got one guy here today that's making some noise. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm not quite ready to start in the observatory.
Well, I actually haven't been shooting spectra really this year myself. Been kind of too busy with work and school, but at least part of my work is doing AVSpec. I still get to play with spectra sometimes. All right, I see that Keith just sent out a link to the SpectroAris program page. Oh, this is great. Okay, I'm going to share screens just in case anyone's not able to open it on their own. This is what that database looks like. And yeah, so these are the program stars then, Keith?
That's correct, yes.
This is wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
And you see at the top, they had the key ones that they're looking at right now. That's not kept as up to date, special interest list. But then they have, like I said, they have the frequency, and you see the HR and the LR. So those are your requirements, and what they're looking for is priority on the main screen, on the main data line.
Interesting. So HR for high res and LR for low res?
Yes.
Okay.
And they tell you how many spectra they have. That's the other fun one. So then you can go and find where they don't have much.
Right.
And that gives you items to really focus to hit up.
Yeah, this is a great resource. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so go ahead, Keith.
I was going to say that the BESS guys, they do a very similar database. So I don't know if you've seen that for looking for the BE stars.
Yes, I have seen BESS.
Yeah,
that's a good program.
They have a database as well, and they tell you what the prioritization is quite well.
That's good. I remember trying out BESS when I first set up my star analyzer. Although I think at the time there was a glitch where I couldn't scroll on the page. So I was just content with, the first few targets that it thought were relevant to me.
But I only have an ELISA, so at a resolution of 1,000, you're not doing much with BESS. They really like higher res data.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think some of our observers who submit to AVSpec are probably dual observers for BESS, because we do get quite a lot of those very high resolution, usually shot with an L high res BE star spectra coming through. Very interesting. Okay, well, I think everyone here has, well, actually, except for you, Keith, because you haven't been to one of these meetings before, has heard my spiel about the various resources that the AVSO has. I'll go over a couple of them real quick for you, Keith, just to show you where to go. So of course, there's AVSpec itself, which I know that you're familiar with, but we also have the spectroscopy observing section. I don't know if you checked that out.
A while back, yes.
Okay.
Haven't lately.
Well, we've just got kind of a whole directory for the AAVSO spectroscopic resources. You can get to it from the section page. So that's mainly what I want to show you. It's over here on the sidebar. It's the spectroscopic manual. Of course, the link out to AVSpec, but the forum, Sarah put together a list of all the various how-to hours and webinars and stuff that the AVSO has done on the topic of spectroscopy. So there's quick links to those. And yeah, just a whole lot of helpful stuff is housed on the section page, maybe not promoted quite as much as it should be.
Great. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Those are good.
Okay, so anyone else have questions related to AVSpec or spectroscopy?
I might mention on the RSpec forum, there's been some discussion about a standard list as well. So if anybody's not on that forum, I don't remember any of the details, but there was some discussion about putting together lists. Did you see that, Lauren?
I don't think that I did. I am on the RSpec forum, but I don't always read every thread. So you're talking about a standard list of interesting program stars, or what is this list for?
Yeah, let me see if I can bring it up real quick.
Okay.
No, I think it may have been a week ago. So I don't have it handy right now. If I can find it, I'll post it on the chat.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, if no one else has any questions or discussion points that you want to bring up last minute, I think I'll just go ahead and close with another call to please observe S Corona Borealis, because frankly, I'm very curious to see how it turns out. I don't know whether it's anything unusual or not, but there's only one way to find out. So yeah, feel free to submit any science spectra that you record to AVSpec. In fact, please do. And feel free to reach out to me at lharrington@aavso.org if you ever have any questions about AVSpec, the submission process. Even if you just want help improving your spectra, I'm happy to help people with that. So thanks everyone for coming today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Goodbye.
Our next, just real quick, our next AVSpec open house meeting, they're held twice monthly on the first Mondays of each month at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And then of course, the third Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern time, which is this session. So we will have our next one on Monday, August 1st. So see y'all then.
Cheers. Bye.